Today, I will explain the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Before we delve in, please click on the subscribe button below the video to stay updated. Many people have probably heard of this book. It's quite famous. How famous, you ask? It's recognized by the United Nations as one of the best practices for nonviolent conflict resolution globally, with millions of copies sold worldwide. If you search for reviews online, you might even find one particularly vivid review describing it as a book that made the publishing editor cry while reading. Despite its fame, many people have a fundamental misunderstanding of this book. Even many articles and social media accounts introducing this book have the same problem. What's the misunderstanding? Many people think Nonviolent Communication is a book about communication techniques, teaching you how to talk. But if you read the book carefully, you'll find it's not just about communication. It addresses a deeper issue: how to eliminate hostility in people's hearts and fill interactions with goodwill. To understand this theme, we need to talk about the origin of this book. It starts in 1943. That year, a young Jewish boy's family moved to Detroit, Michigan, in the USA. They thought a new life was beginning, but unfortunately, just 2 weeks before they moved, a violent racial conflict erupted in a local park, resulting in the deaths of over 40 people in the following days. Even more unfortunate, the Jewish boys' new home was right in the center of this conflict. For 3 days, they stayed inside, too scared to go out. When the riots finally ended and school resumed, more trouble awaited. On his first day at school, he faced discrimination from classmates. When the teacher called his name, 2 classmates glared at him, calling him a Jewish devil. Being just a child, he didn't even understand what Jewish devil meant. And it didn't end there. After school, the 2 classmates cornered him, pushing him to the ground and beating him up. Most people would feel wronged and angry in such a situation, maybe even seek revenge. But this boy was different. He was angry, but he also started thinking deeply about why people react so differently to violence. Why do some people feel only anger and thoughts of revenge, while others, despite their emotions, try to see the positive side? Why do some people easily conflict, while others maintain goodwill and actively seek harmonious relationships? The boy wondered if there was a way to teach people to reach this state, eliminating their own hostility and always maintaining goodwill. So he began his research, initially on his own and later studying under the psychologist Carl Rogers, earning a PhD. After decades of dedicated research, he finally developed this method. By now, you've probably guessed that this boy is the author of the book, Marshall Rosenberg. And this method is what's described in Nonviolent Communication. In 1984, Rosenberg founded the Center for Nonviolent Communication. In 2006, he received the Bridge of Peace Award from the Global Village Foundation for his outstanding contributions to promoting human harmony. Dr. Rosenberg passed away in 2015, but his method of nonviolent communication has spread worldwide. So, what exactly is this method? Simply put, it's about reshaping our thoughts by changing our language. In other words, we often think people speak based on their thoughts, and their words reflect their thoughts. But according to the book, it's often the opposite. We sometimes unconsciously say things that then shape our thoughts. For example, there's a famous story about a leader whose army keeps losing battles. How to report this? If you say defeated repeatedly, it sounds hopeless. But if you say fighting valiantly despite defeats, it gives a sense of resilience. The feeling changes. Or take the old saying, "There is something despicable about a pitiable person." This sounds like there are no good people in the world. But if you reverse it to, "There is something pitiable about a despicable person," it feels like you have more goodwill and understanding towards others. This is language shaping thought. The core of nonviolent communication is using language to eliminate hostility and fill interactions with goodwill. This book aims to show us how changing our language can reduce hostility and improve relationships. Next, I'll explain the book in two parts. Part 1. How to master the systematic method of nonviolent communication. Part 2. Beyond the systematic method, what are the key points to watch out for? Part 1. Master the systematic method of nonviolent communication. If our goal is to eliminate factors that create distance between people, we need to know what those factors are. The author believes the main factor causing estranged relationships is moral judgment. This means we often see someone do something and immediately assign a moral reason to it. For example, seeing someone chatting in the office, we think they're slacking off. Seeing someone with a tattoo, we assume they're bad. Seeing someone putting their feet up on a bus seat, we think they lack public decency. In short, we easily abstract a moral or motivational reason from a behavior. We think there's a moral reason behind their actions, often instinctively. People have a developed ability for self-validation. Once you have a suspicion, you unconsciously find evidence to prove yourself right. For example, if you're eating in a restaurant and someone passes by, and you then notice your phone is missing, you might suspect the passerby of theft. The more you look at them, the more they seem like a thief. They're wearing a hat. Who wears a hat indoors unless they're hiding their identity? If they avoid eye contact, it must be guilt. You decide to call the police, only to find the phone on the floor. Suddenly, the same person looks innocent. Wearing a hat shows they care about their appearance, and avoiding eye contact is just politeness. This is human nature. We habitually speculate on others' actions and find it hard to change. This forms a cycle: observe behavior, moral judgment, collect evidence, self-validation, deepen judgment. You see behavior, but your brain turns it into moral judgment. Obviously, this habit causes problems in life. For example, if a wife sees her husband looking at his phone at home, she might think, "Why are you so lazy? Just playing with your phone. Have you washed the dishes? Helped the kids with homework?" Watching the phone becomes equated with laziness. The husband feels wronged and angry, and they argue. Small things become moral issues. The listener feels wronged, and the speaker feels frustrated. As the author says, labeling people only highlights their faults, not their vulnerabilities. Is your label accurate? Probably not, for two reasons. First, as adults know, the real world isn't like movies with clear heroes and villains. Most people are generally good but make mistakes. Second, if you think someone is deliberately harming you, try harming someone else. You'll find it uncomfortable. For example, if you badmouth someone, you feel uneasy when seeing them again. This shows that being malicious requires significant emotional effort, which most people can't sustain. Doing harm has high psychological costs. Understanding this might help, but in the moment, it's hard to avoid judgment. As Stephen Covey, a famous management expert, said, "Many people listen not to understand but to respond." There's scientific evidence for this. Our brains have two systems. For simplicity, Let's call the first system the pleasure system and the second system the desire system. The pleasure system handles immediate gratification, while the desire system deals with deep-seated desires. For example, when angry, the pleasure system tells you to yell, it feels good. But the desire system reminds you that you truly want a good relationship. Usually, the pleasure system's signal is stronger, drowning out the desire system. You aren't lacking goodwill, you're controlled by the pleasure system. Our task is to let the desire system lead. This is what the book addresses. How? By following 4 steps. Observing without judging. This means describing what you see, focusing on facts, not opinions. Don't dismiss this as simple. Observing without judging is crucial in nonviolent communication. As Indian philosopher Krishnamurti said, observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence. Let's practice distinguishing observation from judgment. You're so generous versus I saw you give money to someone in need. John is lazy versus John spends 10 minutes cleaning each month. Lisa procrastinates versus Lisa studies only the night before exams. The first phrases are judgments. The second are observations. Now that we've practiced, it's clear. But distinguishing observation from judgment is just the first step. The next crucial step is to express your feelings based on your observations, then state your needs based on your feelings, and finally make a request. In short, nonviolent communication involves 4 steps: observation, feeling, need, and request. Let's apply this in a specific situation. When you're angry and ready to argue, use this structure to respond. For example, if a colleague criticizes your work harshly, you might want to snap back. Instead, use the 4 steps. I heard your evaluation and feel my work isn't recognized. I want to improve and gain your approval. Can you give me specific suggestions? This response can diffuse anger and foster goodwill. Observation, feeling, need, and request don't always have to appear together. They can be used flexibly. The key is keeping these 4 elements in mind. Clearly separating them improves communication. Let's practice with the phrase, drink more water. Often, a girl says she feels unwell, and the boy replies, drink more water. This can lead to arguments or even breakups. Why? Because drink more water is just an observation. The underlying need is for concern. Recognizing this, you realize the response should show care. The problem with drink more water is that it's too easy to say without much thought, failing to show genuine concern. In summary, the main cause of estranged relationships is moral judgment. The core of nonviolent communication is to avoid judgment, starting with observation. Then, follow the steps of observation, feeling, need, and request. The underlying logic of this method is to avoid attributing motives and believe in the fundamental goodness of people. This means not assuming someone's actions are against you and believing in your own and others' innate goodness. Part 2. What are the key points to watch out? Now that we've covered the systematic method of nonviolent communication, let's discuss some additional important points the author emphasizes. These tips can also help improve relationships. First tip. Avoid comparisons. Comparing yourself to others is common and can motivate you to improve, but habitual comparisons can harm relationships. For example, Two childhood friends might become distant if one becomes a scientist while the other struggles to find a job. As the author says, comparisons can unconsciously erode our goodwill towards others. Another example is from a book called How to Make Yourself Miserable by Dan Greenberg. It suggests making yourself miserable by comparing yourself to others. For instance, the first exercise in the book has you compare your body measurements to those of models, inevitably making you feel bad. Second tip: don't use have to avoid responsibility. People often say they have to do something to excuse actions they feel guilty about. For instance, a teacher might say, "I hate grading, but I have to do it because it's required." This avoids responsibility. Instead, the teacher should think about how to make grading helpful for students. The author suggests replacing have to with choose to. For example, instead of saying, "I have to grade because it's required," say, "I choose to grade to help students improve." This change in language fosters responsibility and goodwill. Third tip: recognize your emotions. Effective communication requires rationality, but emotions are also important. Emotions often reveal underlying rational needs, such as the desire to be heard or cared for. For example, after an argument, guilt might drive you to reconcile, showing that emotions can lead to rational actions. Understanding this helps you identify the needs behind your emotions. Let's distinguish between primary and secondary emotions. For example, if a car cuts you off, your primary emotion might be fear. This can quickly turn into anger, a secondary emotion. Recognizing the primary emotion helps you address the real issue. For instance, if you feel angry when your partner plays on their phone instead of helping with chores, your primary emotion might be fatigue and a need for support. Expressing this need directly can improve communication. Understanding that emotions are often driven by judgments helps you change your perspective and respond more positively. In conclusion, nonviolent communication teaches us to use language to transform walls into windows, fostering better relationships. The book's essence is captured in a poem by Ruth Bebermeyer, which the author includes at the beginning. Words are windows, or they're walls. They sentence us, or set us free. When I speak and when I hear, let the love light shine through me. There are things I need to say, things that mean so much to me. If my words don't make me clear, will you help me to be free? If I seem to put you down, if you felt I didn't care, try to listen through my words to the feelings that we share. This poem encapsulates the core of nonviolent communication, changing our language to transform walls into windows, opening up relationships filled with goodwill. That's the essence of this book. The original book link is attached at the end for further reading. You can also click the share button below the video to share this book with your friends. Congratulations, you've just finished another book.